All right, welcome everybody. I want to say a huge shout out not only to our Henderson location, but to our Summerlin family, our Sunrise Mountain location, Southern Highlands, and those who are joining us in Kingman, as well as our online family, and those joining us in our partnership with God Behind Bars and different prison facilities around the country. Thank you guys for being with us today. We are going to talk today about how God is greater than our loneliness. And even when I say the word lonely, it's like the whole room just kind of changes, you know? Like nobody likes to talk about loneliness. Nobody wants to think about loneliness. But the truth is, we all wrestle with loneliness. You can be lonely sitting in a room with hundreds of people. You can be lonely in a marriage. You can be lonely at a Thanksgiving table. Hello. You can be lonely in a whole lot of places in your life. I remember one of the biggest fights Lori and I ever had. I have no idea what it was about. Isn't that how it is with fights? Like I can't remember what it was about. I just remember we had it. And I remember there was a moment in the midst of this fight. It was pretty early on in our marriage, and I was standing there. She was so upset. She was crying, and she looked at me, and she said, "Just leave." And I said, "Okay." And I went and got my keys, and I walked out, and I got in my car, and I went and got some coffee. I went and ran some errands. Actually, because I thought when she said, "Just leave," through tears, she meant just leave. We need some space. You need to take a little while and work through this, which as a guy, that's how we often process, right? We're literal, take things literal, and then we go off and we like to get alone. Many guys, they call it going to our cave. We like to go away and work it out, right? Many women don't work it out in isolation, right? They want to have a conversation. So in that moment, after I ran some errands, I was feeling better. I remember getting back to the house and I'm like, everything's fine. Everything's great now. Go in. We'll just kind of move on. Everything's good. Oh. And I didn't realize I had left her in her loneliness. And I remember I walked in and she looked at me and she's got huge tears, super upset, and she says, "How could you leave me?" And I remember thinking, because you told me to. But something in the back of my mind said, if you say that, you will interrupt your future happiness. Just roll with it, right? And I'm like, because at this point, every guy in the room knows, you cross a line where you're afraid to say anything. Just shut up. Because you're afraid whatever you say might lead to something else, and you don't even understand how you got here, much less how you're going to get out of this, right? And so I can remember in that moment just sort of listening, and that was when I first realized that when many women are upset and they tell you to leave, what they really mean is, come over here and sit with me on the couch and let's work this out. I just thought leave meant leave, but that's just me. It's possible to love somebody. It's possible to be in a relationship with somebody and still find yourself in seasons where you feel very misunderstood and even very lonely. It's possible to feel lonely in your dreams, or lonely in your sacrifices, or lonely in your experiences in your life. It's possible to sit in a church gathering with people all around you and feel incredibly alone. Loneliness is something we all wrestle with, and we don't talk about it very much, but today I want to talk to you about how God is greater than our loneliness. And let me just say before we dive into this, I think loneliness is in part a result of what the Bible would call the fall, or theologians would call the fall, the sin that entered into our broken, fallen world. I don't think we're ever going to be in a place, no matter how spiritually mature we are, no matter how connected we are to other people, where we never experience loneliness. I think that's maybe a false ideal. In fact, I believe that ultimately one day in heaven, that's where our loneliness will be dealt with. But there are some things that we can do between now and then to help in our loneliness. And so Psalm 139 is where we're going to be today, beginning in verse 1. We're going to look at the psalmist who gives some great insight into how to process this loneliness. You can grab your Bible, your mobile device. We'll bring this up on the screens as well. And as I read it, when we get to the red word, I'm going to ask you to read it out loud together with me. Psalm 139, beginning in verse 1. Look at this. He says, "O Lord, you have examined my heart and know what? Everything about me." Now, that word everything in the original language means everything. The good, the bad, the ugly. What you're thinking right now, what you're not thinking about right now, what you thought about last night, what you did last night, last month, last year, last decade. And that can be a little unsettling. Hello? Everything? Everything. He says, when I sit down or when I stand up, my thoughts, even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. Wow. Now, what's interesting is the psalmist isn't writing Psalm 139 from a place of fear and insecurity. He's not freaked out by this. He's already gotten past that. And he's realized that God is personal, the God of the Bible, and that God loves his children. And he's at a place where he's actually rejoicing, as we'll see in this psalm, that God knows everything about him. Listen, God knows what you have done, God knows what you are doing, and God knows what you will do, and he loved you anyway. He loved you anyway. He's a personal God. So when you look at the Bible, the greatest promise that I believe is found in the Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation, the number one promise of the Bible is the presence of God. It's God's presence for us in our lives. From Adam and Eve walking in the garden with God, this picture of intimacy and presence, all the way to the book of Revelation, the last book of the New Testament, which in Revelation, the last chapters, it says, John says, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling of God is with people. That's the vision, that God would once again dwell with us, his presence. God's presence is his promise for your loneliness. God's presence is his promise for your loneliness. So how do you experience more of God's presence when you may feel lonely? First, lean in to God's presence. Lean into God's presence. Now, around our family, we have this new app that we've been using called the Life 360 app. And we actually got together as a family, my daughter, my son, my wife, we all got our phones out and we all sort of synced everybody up on this app. Now here's what's cool about this app. It basically lets me know where my family is at any given time. I can just pull it up and I can see where my daughter is, where my son is, where my wife is, which I'm thinking like, this was no good for me as a teenager. Hello? Right? You know what I mean? I'm like, I am so thankful, God, that this app did not exist when I was a teenager. But as a dad, I can tell you, this is my favorite app ever invented. I love this app. So we always know where each other is. And it actually, you can sign up, you can click a certain button and it will send you updates. And so it'll send me updates like this. Emma Wilhite, that's my teenage daughter. Emma Wilhite has left home. I'm like, oh, good to know. Emma has arrived at school. This is awesome. It even will tell me Emma's top speed. I'm like, oh yeah. The top speed she's going. I love this app. We live in an amazing world. Because I hadn't really processed that it was sending me all this information about Emma, but it was also sending my wife all this information about me. She sent me this text message a while back and had this screenshot from her phone back this summer. Judd completed a 27-mile drive, top speed, 87 miles an hour. I'm like, I got to get rid of this app. This has got to go away. I told her I must have just been passing a semi or something. I'm not sure. But sometimes when we think about God's presence, we sort of think about God like the Life 360 app, like God's sort of following us around, right? God knows everything going on in our lives, and his whole point is to call us up when we break the speed limit, to get involved when we break a rule or we go outside of the line. And that's sort of our perception of God. And yet the psalmist is challenging us to kind of look at this and process it differently. He's rejoicing in the fact that God is present in our lives. And he's going to give us several different ways that we can do that. One of the things he says, God, you know everything about me. He says, you know my thoughts, you know it all. And so look, when you feel misunderstood, and sometimes when you feel lonely, it's because you feel misunderstood, realize that God's got you. God understands you. God knows everything about you in your life. Isn't it easier to be around somebody that just sort of gets you? You have friends in your life that get you, you know what I'm talking about? And it doesn't matter their background. When people get you, it's just easy. You just look at each other and you're like, I get you. I know what you're saying and what you're communicating verbally, non-verbally. I'm following you. And then when you're with somebody who doesn't get you, it can be really hard, right? You say something you think is funny and they don't laugh. You know, you say something, you mean it one way, and they get offended. And you're like, that's not what I meant. You know, I need somebody that knows my heart. God knows your heart, and God loves you, and God created you, and he gets you. When you feel misunderstood, God gets you. But not only that, the psalmist is going to go on. Check this out. Psalm 139, beginning in verse 5. Let's bring it up on the screen. When we get to the red word, help me out. He says, you go before me and follow me. Now, just stop right there. This is one of my favorite sentences in the Bible. It says, look, God goes before you, and he follows you. He comes behind you. So some of you, you're walking into some tough stuff, even this week. Some of you are going to walk into a confrontation this week. Some of you are excited because it's Thanksgiving. You're going to get to see family and friends, and the Cowboys win. It's going to be an awesome Thanksgiving. Others of you, not so much. You know, you're Chargers fans, and so that's going to be a frustrating Thanksgiving game, and then you're already like looking at going in to see family, and some of you haven't seen that family in a while. Some of you have been avoiding that family as long as you could, but now it's Thanksgiving, and you got to go into it. You got to walk into it. Some of you, it's not so much your family, it's your spouse's family, and they're demanding this year you go to Thanksgiving at their house, and so you're going to have to walk into that. And see, here's what I want you to know. Whatever you're walking into, whatever difficult situation, whatever uncomfortable situation, whatever frustrating situation, the psalmist says, God goes before you. He's already there. He goes before you. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean you won't have problems, but you can walk in with a sense of confidence. God goes before you. Some of you right now, you sense that you have an opportunity, maybe a job that you could apply for, maybe an opportunity that you could move toward, but you're afraid of failing. You're afraid that somebody's going to tell you no. You're afraid that somebody's going to come along and reject you in that moment. But listen, I'm going to suggest to you, go for it. I'm going to challenge you. Reach out. Take that step. No won't hurt as bad as you think it'll hurt. And remember, God goes before you. Maybe you're not supposed to have that opportunity, but you'll never know if you don't walk into it. So he says, you go before me, and he says, and you follow me. In other words, you got my back. You come in behind me, right? We all need friends that have our back. It's an amazing thing when somebody really has your back. I can tell you, like most of us, we could probably count on one hand, maybe two, the amount of people in our lives we say, that person has my back. I don't know about you, but when somebody has my back, I'm loyal to the death, man. I'm fiercely loyal to people that have had my back. And here's what God's saying. Here's what the Bible's saying. The psalmist is saying, God, you have my back. You follow me. You go before me. You go behind me. Okay, that's one sentence. Let's keep moving. It says, you place your hand of what? Blessing. You see that? Your hand of blessing on my head. Oh, this is good. Your hand of blessing on my head. He says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. So he's not freaked out by this. I want you to see this again. He's rejoicing in it. He's celebrating it. This is where he gets his strength. God is everywhere. God knows everything. God's like a huge divine Life 360 app in my life, and it's a beautiful thing. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. And so when you feel abandoned by God, realize God is for you. That's what the psalmist is saying. God is for me. God is for me in this situation. He goes before me, he goes behind me. He says he puts his hand of blessing on my head. I'll never forget reading this theologian named Wayne Grudem, brilliant thinker, and he talked about how if you look at God's presence throughout the entire Bible, a curious thing happens. He says sometimes when God's presence is spoken of throughout the Bible, in the Old Testament especially, a few times he says God's presence is there to punish. Sometimes God's presence is there to judge. But he says ultimately that's just a handful of times throughout the entire Bible. And yet we let that shape our perception of God and his presence. He says the overwhelming amount of times that the Bible speaks of God's presence, it's his presence to bless his people. It's his presence to bless his people. It's the hand of blessing in our lives. Friends, I don't know if you've Some of us, our perception of God is that he's there to punish us and judge us, when I think God, from the book of Genesis on, by the way, the word blessing is mentioned more in the book of Genesis than any other book in the Bible, the first book in the Bible. The very first thing God does, the very first thing God does in the book of Genesis after he creates Adam and Eve is, it says, literally within words, it says, creates him and he blesses them. God introduces himself from the first book of the Bible as the God who blesses, who loves to bless, who wants to bless. And yet we get the perception God's presence means he wants to punish and he wants to judge. And I think the Bible's trying to challenge us to realize his presence is there to bless us. Not only that, when you feel lost, God's got you. Look at this, Psalm 139. Let's pick this up in verse 8. Psalm 139. Beginning of verse 8, he says, if I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest ocean, even there your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night. But even in darkness, I cannot what? Hide from you. Turn to the person next to you and say, you can run, but you can't hide. Listen, man, I spent years of my life running from God, right? I spent years on the run. We all know what that's like. You go your own way, you block him out, you do your own thing. Maybe you think God could never love you. Maybe you think God could never work in your life. Maybe you just think there is no God. Maybe you think, look, God's abandoned me. If there is a God, he's left me to my own devices, and so you run from God. But here the psalmist says, look, and no matter where you go, you can't hide from God. You can't escape his presence. Lean into it because he's available. And listen, his presence is his promise for your loneliness. His presence is his promise for your loneliness. It doesn't mean you'll always just sort of walk around like, oh man, I'm just so happy, and I just feel so fulfilled. But look, in the midst of dark days and tough times, in the midst of lonely nights, you realize I'm never really alone. God's always been by my side. God goes before me and God follows me. And I take comfort in his presence in my life. Lean in to God's presence in your loneliness. Here's another one. Reach out to God's people. Reach out to God's people. I found this website that basically had this online article that had texts from your ex, and I want to share some of these with you. Just break it up here for a minute. But these are people that were in bad relationships. Then the ex reaches back out. He says, "I miss you." This person says, "I don't." He says, "You will never find another person like me." I love this. Person says, "That's the idea." That's the goal right there. All right, let's bring up the next one here. It says, are you ever going to grow up and talk to me? This person says, okay, meet me in the Blockbuster video parking lot. I said, Blockbuster isn't a thing anymore. Exactly. Some of you are like, what's Blockbuster? Okay, listen, Blockbuster was like a drive-up Netflix back when you had to go get the actual video and put it in the VCR player. All right, here's one more. This person says, heard song and thought of you. I Want You Back, the Jackson 5. Great song. Says, I heard a song too. We are never, ever getting back together. Taylor Swift. Well, listen, there are some relationships that can be toxic, right? There are some relationships you need to get away from, certainly. But all the research shows in general, the quality of our lives is directly connected to the quality of our relationships with people. We need other people. And you see this in the Bible clearly taught from the very beginning. Here's, in the book of Genesis, here's Adam. Right? Adam's hanging out in the Garden of Eden. He's in paradise and all of this. God comes to Adam and he says, it is not good. Everything up to this point has been good. God does creation, all of this, everything's good. Morning and night, and it's all good, and everything's good. Good, 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 good. Then we get to Adam and he says, it is not good. Ooh. I don't know about you, but it's not good when God says it's not good, right? Like, what's not good? It's not good. He says that you're alone. Now, I want you to think about this. A lot of times we say, like, God's all I need. I've preached this. I get the heart of it. I still will say it. You'll catch me. I'll say it like God's all I need. I understand that. I understand the emotion of it, where it comes from. I understand the truth behind it, that at its core, God is the only one we need. But here's what I think is fascinating, is that here's God speaking to Adam in a situation of paradise before sin enters the world, when he's in absolute communion and connection with God, and God basically says, no, it's not good. You need something else. You need to be with people. And so, the Bible goes on to tell the story of how he creates the woman. And Adam sees the woman, and here's what we see. It's the first time in the book of Genesis, and I guess you could say in the record of human history, that poetry exists. Because in the original Hebrew language, this is actually poetry. We're waxing poetic now. Genesis chapter 2, verse 23. Look at this. Adam says, at last. Adam's looking around, he's like, hey. There's something new in the garden. I like it. He says, this one is bone from my bone and flesh from my flesh, and she will be called Woe Man, because she was taken from man. Adam looks out and he's like, it just got interesting. I don't know what that animal was named. I could care less, because something else just showed up. And this is good. And it's easy to sort of read the early chapters of Genesis and this account and kind of reduce it to simply like romantic relationships. But I think it's so much more than that. God knew that we needed to be in community with one another. And this is bigger than just husbands and wives. This is mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and friends and best friends, BFFs, lifelong friends, people you hang out with. We need community. It's not good when we're just alone. Now, some of you are introverts, and so the idea of being around a whole lot of people totally exhausts you, and you want to go do something else. I understand. But even a radical introvert needs a friend. May not need 50 friends, but you need a friend, right? We all need people in our lives. Some of you are extroverts, and 500 friends isn't enough. It's like a big black hole that can never get filled up, right, with more time and relationships. And so we're all wired up differently, but we all need each other. And so one of the ways we're to deal with our loneliness as it creeps in is to reach out to God and lean on to God, but then reach out to other people. Realize other people can go a long way in helping you with your loneliness. Just being around other people is so important in our loneliness. I remember when 9/11 happened. I had just moved to California with my wife and our young daughter at the time, and I'd only been there a couple weeks. And when 9/11 happened and the Twin Towers collapsed, I remember we had a service that night at the church that I was serving at as a pastor, and it was probably my second week in Southern California living there and being part of this church. I remember standing on the front steps of that church, and thousands of people were coming into the church, right? Because you remember 9/11, like everybody's world got rocked. And I remember I didn't know a single person. That, frankly, as I think about it, was probably the loneliest day of my life. Because I stood on the steps of that church as all these people walked by, and I didn't know anybody. And all I wanted to do was get on a plane and go back home. And how do I define home? Home was where the people that I loved were. Not my wife and kid, but everybody else that I knew, that I loved. That was home. And I contrast that with the mass shooting that occurred in Las Vegas, October 1st. Standing here at Central and seeing so many friends and family, people that I love with all my heart. When you're heartbroken and devastated and don't know what to do, you just sometimes need to be around your family, your spiritual family, your church family. We reach out to one another. And even when we don't find the answers, we find strength together, right? We stand together. And it combats some of that loneliness. It may not make it go away, but it combats it in our lives. So lean into God. Lean into one another in the church community. Reach out to God's people. The third way we can deal with loneliness in our life is engage with God's purpose. When I'm going through something in my life and feel loneliness creep in, sometimes the tendency is to pull back. Or I've even done this. You sort of test people a little bit. You think, I'm not gonna text this group of friends for a while. I'm gonna see how long it takes them to text me. Right? I'm not gonna show up to my small group anymore. I'm just gonna see how long it takes for people to realize I wasn't there. I'm not gonna go to church for a while. I'm just gonna see how long it takes for somebody to reach out to me. And I understand, I sympathize with that sentiment when you're hurting, when you're feeling lonely, and you feel like, does anybody care? Do I matter to anybody? But here's what I found in my own life. That's a very dangerous game to play, and prepare to be disappointed if you play it. But here's what I've found. That sense of loneliness, that sense of wanting to pull back, maybe test people a little bit, is really my cue that instead of pulling back, I need to reach out. I need to call somebody. I need to be proactive. I need to show love to somebody. And when I do, I'm engaging in God's purpose. And so, friends, I just want to talk to you about how the church community can help you engage God's purpose in your life. There are so many ways you can serve, get in a group, get to know other people, use your gifts in some way in the community or through the church to help somebody else. And when you're feeling lonely, it's a huge antidote to that loneliness to bring joy and happiness to somebody else. That's what we do around here. In fact, one of the things I'm so excited about is an initiative that we're launching next weekend with a teaching series called Merry and Bright. And we've been praying and dreaming about how can we light up the holidays for up to 10,000 kids across our communities this holiday season. How can we make a difference in their lives? And so we've looked at a lot of different options. We've talked to a lot of people. We've prayed through a lot of options. And there's some core things that I think we're going to engage in this holiday season that's pretty exciting. On the one hand, it's amazing to me that in our day and age, with technology, with advances, with all that we have as a culture and as a society, that there are still kids in pretty much every community that get by without sufficient qualities and quantities of food. It just it just feels like it shouldn't happen. But it does. So this year, we're going to do some things this holiday season to provide food for hungry kids, for kids who may be hurting in their lives in that way. We want to provide Christmas for some of these kids and make a huge impact in their lives. And then statistically, there are thousands and thousands of kids in our country and in each one of our communities who have a parent or both parents who are incarcerated. And however you feel about somebody who's been incarcerated, I think we all agree that, look, the kids had nothing to do with that, but they often pay the price. And so we're gonna do an event again this year that we did last year that just rocked our worlds, and it was called All is Bright. And All is Bright is sort of part of this Merry and Bright initiative. But in All is Bright, our goal is to provide Christmas for the kids of inmates. And not only Christmas, by going out and purchasing a Christmas gift, bringing it to our different locations, and us putting that in a space where then the inmates can go in and pick their own gifts for their kids and give those gifts to their kids from them. But we'll also, for those who can be a part of it, put on a dinner and host that to bring those families together. It's an incredibly powerful thing. And I want to introduce you to a very brave person who was part of it this last year, who's going to share a little bit about her experience. And before I invite her out, I want you to know it takes a lot of courage to be honest about your story. It takes a lot of courage when you have a season in your life that you want to forget and move on, to be able to stand up and say, yes, I was incarcerated, I was in prison, I went through this, and I'm trying to move on in my life. And I'm very proud of Patty, but I want us all to be sensitive to the fact that this isn't an easy thing. And she's here for one reason, because of what it meant for her and her son and her family. So let's put our hands together for Patty as she comes out and joins me here.
Oh, God.
We'll just stand up right here. Now, come on, I told you it was the home team. I told you you're around people who won't hold your past over you. You're around people who know we're all a lot more than whatever our mistakes or failures may be. And everybody who's watching at one of our God Behind Bars locations, I want to thank you for being here and being a part. And I want you to know we love you. And we know you're more than your rap sheet or your failures or even how you feel about yourself. And so, Patty, thank you for joining me. Thank you for being with us. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, several years ago, I was like at the top of my world. Like I was a professional, had a great career, and life kind of hit me hard. In a very short period of time, I lost my dad. I was going through divorce, on the verge of losing my house, filed bankruptcy, lost my job, started a business. And during that time, I didn't know how to deal with all of those losses and all of those frustrations and challenges. And so I made some very poor choices. Those choices eventually caught up to me, and I was sentenced to 3 to 8 years in prison. When I went to my sentencing hearing, I was booked in that day and found out I was 4 months pregnant. So 5 months into my prison sentence, I gave birth to my son. I got to spend 24 hours with him at the hospital, and I saw him a total of 6 times over the next 2 years. The All Is Bright event was the first time I got to really spend time with my baby.
So let me just, I know this is very hard. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you, sweetie. Listen, so All Is Bright, for those who are able and go through all the proper clearances, even though they may be at some part of serving out the final part of their sentence, some of them are able to come and gather where we unite the kids with the inmates. And so you're seeing them in a different context than they normally see them. I know you visited your son Liam, or he visited you, but I know it's complicated.
It took a year for his visitation to be approved. And during the visits, it was very strict and regimented. Visits were like across a table, and so it was very limited in terms of time. I didn't get to spend much time with him or hold him or do the basic things like change his diaper or feed him, because those are things that aren't allowed in visiting.
So All Is Bright, this event comes along, and I know it made a huge impact in your life. In fact, one of the things that I heard you say is that this was really the first time you got to play with your son.
It was, and it's more than the presents. The presents were sort of the icebreaker, but honestly, getting to pick presents out and think about, what does my baby like? What can I do to play with my child? What can I do to engage with him for the first time? And then to actually have people there who served us a meal so that I could enjoy having a dinner with my baby and spending my first Christmas with him and watching him open presents and hug him and tickle him and play with him in a setting that was comfortable and friendly and non-judgmental. It meant the world not just to me, but to my family and to my son.
So we're in a position now where we're hoping to do this for hundreds and even hopefully thousands of kids. What would you say to us about the difference something like this makes in somebody's life?
There are no words to express what that one moment does, not just for the inmate, but for the children, to give them that moment, to give them that opportunity to see their parents without the stress, without the fear, without wondering how much time do I have, and can I hold you, and can I hug you, and can I give you a kiss, and is that for me? And have it mean something. That was an opportunity that can never be taken away, and that every child deserves.
It's awesome, Patty. Thank you so much. Thanks for the courage to come out here and share your story. We love you. Bless you. Thank you. I'm proud of her for being willing to share her story, and that's just a part of her story. Listen, for those of you in our God Behind Bars locations, the part of your story up to now is not your whole story. And God is not finished writing the story through your life. God can use you in powerful ways in the future, and don't let anybody tell you different. Don't let the lies of the enemy or the lies of your own thoughts keep you buried in the past. And that's true for all of us. God is not finished writing the story in our lives today. So I want to challenge you this holiday season to join with me Let's impact up to 10,000 kids across our locations. I want to challenge you to think about your first Christmas gift. You know, it's around this time of year, my kids will come together, we'll say, what do you want for Christmas? New car. That ain't gonna happen. What else you want for Christmas? Right? And when we start having these conversations, let's make our first Christmas gift this year go to change the child of an inmate and provide Christmas for them. And there's two ways that we can do that. One, I want to encourage everybody who can to join us over the next several weeks and give a gift to Mary and Bright, a financial gift. $47 a child will make an impact. And we're going to use those monies to hopefully put on an event for up to 1,500 kids through the All Is Bright campaign, providing them not only gifts, but putting on banquets and uniting them with their parents. We're going to use that to feed hungry kids, and we're going to use that to help make Christmas happen for kids who otherwise wouldn't have it happen in their life. So $47 a kid. You can sponsor 1, 2, 5 kids. And then you're going to get instructions where we can go out and also, in addition to that, purchase a gift that can be brought up to the church that we will then provide for those inmates as well, where they're able to take a gift and give it to their kids from them and provide Christmas from them. This is all about engaging in God's purpose. And as we engage, even in small ways in God's purpose, it pulls us back from our isolation, and we realize the joy is really found in giving. So you should have received when you came in some printed material on Mary and Bright. If you'd like some more information, just slip your hand in the air. We've got ushers across our locations. We'll get that printed material to you. You're going to hear about it over the next few weeks. If you want to sponsor a child now, or 2 or 5, you can do that after service across our locations. You can just go to the lobby. You can go to our website, centralonline.tv/Mary and Bright, centralonline.tv/Mary and Bright, and you can give a gift financially there. But I want to encourage you all to be praying about it, to be thinking about it. I'm just excited. We've had this vision for the several weeks, really for several months. Since this summer, we've been talking about how do we light up the holidays this holiday season for kids who normally wouldn't experience it. And here's what I think. I think God loves kids. I believe it with all my heart. I think Jesus had a special place in his heart for kids. And we as a church, as we love and bless and give and protect kids, we're going to experience the favor of God. How could we not? How could we not? So what do you do with your loneliness? Well, realize everybody faces loneliness. Realize that we'll probably always face it at certain levels until we get to heaven. But even in the midst of it, understand that God's presence is his promise for your loneliness. And not only that, lean into his presence. Reach out to other people. Look, if God's presence is his promise for your loneliness, often God's people are the pathway for his presence. When you're in the presence of God's people, you often experience the encouragement, the love, the joy shared from them to you that is a reflection of God's presence in your heart and life. And then engage with God's purpose. Do something for someone else, and you'll make an eternal difference in their life. Let's bow and let's pray together. God, we thank you for your love. We thank you for the kindness that you show us every day. And I pray that you'll use us this holiday season to touch and help so many people, that we'll make such a mark that whether people believe in you or not, they'll be grateful that your people showed up and shared with kindness and gratitude in their heart. God, we love you. We thank you. We give you praise. In Christ's name, amen. Well, I'm going to throw it now to our different location pastors who are going to talk us through the rest of the experience.